Go away.
I like games that are rough around the edges in terms of both gameplay and graphics. The early 2000s were great for this. 3D was pretty widely available, and people generally had a grasp on how shit controlled in a 3D space. But they were still trying whatever the fuck, and it was mostly janky as hell.
Add a bullhorn.
Why?
So he can yell at helicopters.
Hey, I'm gonna take out the helicopter now!
Why though?
I don't know, it might come up.
I don't sound Ukrainian.
Well, neither do I. I don't know what Ukrainian sounds like.
De facto intense tata svenska. Smaller companies wanted to do free roamer stuff, but none of them quite knew what they were doing. And then in walks the Ukrainian developer Deep Shadows with a smile. They've got a whole bunch of ideas for a free roamer, and about a handful of them have an actual function. Boiling Point came out in 2005, and it was slammed for being a bug-addled mess. It's a case where reviewers who were late to the party were generally more favourable thanks to a massively patched version. It was now only buggy enough to be occasionally annoying rather than outright hilarious. I'm over a bloody decade late, so I'm pretty fortunate in this regard. And despite the bugs, I came away rather liking Boiling Point. It provided me with a good 15 hours of fun. The only problem is I played it for 30. If it's any consolation, the bad hours are not always consecutive. But even beyond the bugs, it is a flawed and occasionally irritating game, which is perhaps a little ahead of its time. Deep Silver did release 2 spiritual sequels to Boiling Point, White Gold War in Paradise, which is basically the same game but with islands instead of one big island, and Precursors, which is a sci-fi take on the formula. It probably speaks loudly about what sort of person I am, that I would sooner play White Gold, which is basically the exact same shit on a newer engine with less land. Now look, I really do want to talk over it, but I have to let the whole intro play and speak for itself, because absolutely nothing I can say will be funnier or more appropriately scene-setting than this.
We boil at different degrees. Ralph Waldo Emerson, U.S. philosopher and poet, 1803 to 1882. Realia, South America, 2005.
Pick up! Dad, it's Lisa. You gotta come get me. Get on a plane and come get me. Dad, is that you? I can't hear you. Dad!
Paris, France, 2005. Saul Myers is ex-military.
Myers, it's Pierre. The newspapers confirmed. There's been no sighting of her for 40 hours. So, I'm sorry. She could be anywhere.
Saul Myers' daughter has disappeared.
Saul? Saul!
Saul Myers is going to Puerto Sombra. Saul Myers is going to hit boiling point.
Right, you got that. Did you get all that? Well, for starters, never mind the part about boiling points. He never reaches that titular thing. I mean, unless that was a warning for what was about to happen like a few seconds later, he just got all the anger out of his system right then and there and went to board a plane for Realia.
Yeah, this ain't the best country to have to go looking for a missing daughter. But believe me, there's worse.
I hope that doesn't come from experience, or I will not hold out much hope for Lisa. Our only lead in the country is the editor at the paper Lisa was working at. The first thing I do is give a local kid 2 pesos, ask for the lay of the land,
Where can a guy get a drink in this town?
and then head to the nearest bar to join the local communist party.
That's commendable, gringo.
How's life, gringo?
Life is good. You don't look like a local or a traveler for that matter.
I'm interested in finding out more about Nikola Tesla's theories, like remote energy transfer in the space of ideas, the mind escape.
Wow, you are incredibly boring. I just joined the bloody communist guerrillas a few tables over from here. You're going to need to be better conversation than this if you want my interest, pal. I mean, not that I'm a very good communist. It's pretty clear that Saul is only in communism for the money.
For now, I'd just like to know how I can help you out for a little moolah.
He is also an unbelievable dork and an arsehole. So, beyond this introduction, bearing in mind that this was my first 10 minutes in the country, how do I sum up Realia? Well, let's just say the fruit stalls sell 2 kinds of pineapple. Before I put the plot off any longer, I knock off and spend what little starting money I've got on an AK-47, I stock up on pain-killing syringes, and I figure since I'm holidaying somewhere tropical, I'll buy 10 coconuts and stash them into my bag. This is probably prepared enough to talk to the editor. The guy implies he wants money for information on Lisa's whereabouts.
I will be in great danger if I try to help you. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you?
And then he implies it a lot less.
And that costs money. About 2,000 pesos.
So I threaten him, and this allows me to skip some side questing. I will not always be this lucky. Lisa was last heard from when she went to talk to a local arsehole named Don Pedro, who is a big cheese mafia man in these parts. The editor will not tell me where he lives, so I have to go and learn it from a local bartender who isn't a giant baby. And by talking to the architect of his villa, because of course this guy snuck in a whole bunch of secret passages. The editor wasn't completely useless, at least. He did give me Lisa's car, which teleports into existence outside of the office. A directional mic, which I never once used, in fact I completely forgot about it, since the only sound you really have to worry about in the game are gunfire, and that's generally pretty loud. And a fragment of Xenus.
What is this, a rock?
Which is the first part of a really long side quest fetch quest that I'm not even going to talk about beyond this point. He also gives us our daughter's diary, and guess what, it's fucking useless. Some journalist you are. Lastly, he hands over a book on handling boats. I mean, he gives me this for free and then goes on a big sales pitch about how great it is and how they publish so many manuals like this, and I don't care, I'm here to be action dad. So, despite the architect telling me about secret passages, my approach for Pedro's villa is a bit more direct and it doesn't go very well. After death, I decide that if I'm going to hit Don Pedro, I'm going to need some practice first. According to my stats, I'm a weakling who can't aim my gun. So Saul Myers' past in the Foreign Legion should probably be called into question. It doesn't matter anyway, because the only stats worth a damn are carry weight for some more guns, and I guess occasionally you get 1 extra hit point. That doesn't really amount to anything though. And so my experience with the side quests begin in earnest. To shake off the cobwebs, get some better gear, and prepare to hit that manor, I take on a request from those guerrilla chaps I joined a bit ago. Attacking a military base single-handedly does seem like as good a warm-up as any. Just break on in, nab some classified documents and bring them back. Right, give me a couple hours and they'll be all yours. I already have a feeling like I'm over-preparing. I did end up doing a few missions for the guerrillas beyond this, because I was having more fun than expected driving around doing jobs for them. But along the way, I did realise something. The Mafia is a faction in this game. I wonder where Don Pedro stands. So, sod the guerrillas. I went and joined the Mafia as well. They're exactly as dangerous to work for, but they pay a whole lot better. Our Don is a guy called Esteban, and as luck would have it, he does know Pedro. So by doing some jobs for him and forking over $2 grand, he arranges a meeting between us.
Hi, Don Esteban sent me.
Did that editor say I did something to Lisa? I always knew he'd spill his guts if anyone offered him money. But if he's trying to pit us against each other, then this is really bad business.
It seems the newspaper editor was bullshitting me in that Pedro and Lisa were on good terms. Well, the objective tells me to trust him at least.
If you need any help looking for your daughter, come straight to me.
And he did give me a book that will teach me how to pilot aircraft, which is way better than boats. So why not? Back to the newspaper office. And this time, it's personal. First though, let's do those boating and flying lessons. I'm a natural. I also did some more jobs for the Mafia first, since, you know, I want a new gun and maybe a new car. Lisa had no style. After that, it's back to the office, and just as he's about to actually be useful for once in his life,
I want to know
he's shot to death. Myers does not seem fazed at all.
who put that guy on the roof to take you out.
and we nip off outside to ask if anyone saw what just happened. Well, it turns out the donut salesman did, but he's not only an idiot, but somehow he's such an idiot that the whole conversation goes wildly off track.
Come get your donuts!
Did you see the killer? Did you?
Killer? What killer? Why? Ah, he killed someone, and so that's why you're calling him a killer, right?
What are you, the village idiot?
No. Why do you ask?
Yes, a killer. Don't make me demonstrate.
Ah, you probably mean that guy who was shooting from the rooftop with a rifle, right?
Now, why would I mean him?
Well, if you say so. How about the donut?
How much for a donut?
Almost for nothing. 5 pesos, 40 for 10. You won't regret it. They cure anything and everything. Just what the doctor ordered, amigo.
Give me a donut. I got the munchies all of a sudden.
Here you go. Enjoy your snack.
Long story short, once I get him back on subject, I have to pay him 4,000 pesos so that he'll give me enough information for Don Pedro to fill in the gaps for a further 20,000. Oddly fitting for a donut salesman.
Don Pedro, someone just rubbed out the editor. The killer took a pot shot from the building across the street. Good shot, too. Got it right between the eyes.
Saul, now's not the time to be impressed.
I can't believe it.
Here's the thing. I could go and ask the police, or perhaps the soldiers at the checkpoint outside of town, but in the course of working for the Mafia, attacking the same military base about 3 times, we're on less than amicable terms. Not that the guys at the police station are actually really doing anything to deal with me being here. So, my only option is to pay up.
Enemy attack! Alert!
Not that I exactly have 20 grand to spare. Well, time for side questing. This is the structure of the main quest, repeated over and over again. You get a nugget of information that brings you an inch closer to Lisa's captor, you act on that information, but then you need a bit more information, because it turns out that last spec was useless, or a misdirection, or a red herring, just generally fucking worthless. So you go somewhere to get that necessary information. It could be to Don Pedro, or some quest bloke in another faction. And they either want a whole bunch of side quests done, or you pay an exorbitant fee. What's the best way to get money in this game, you ask? Well, that'll be side quests. Selling guns gets you a pittance. I'm talking 30 quid per M16, and well, that's a lot of dead soldiers to make up the 20 Gs. Selling stolen cars isn't much better. The deal will take the first 2 and then get all paranoid and start shafting you.
That's enough, gringo. No, I don't need any more of your stolen cars. Next thing I...
No.
Then get out and...
And what about...
Well,
Just one.
it's a deal.
Fishing isn't very profitable either. So your options are side quests and keeping your money, or side quests, and depending on your faction standings, you may not even have a choice in the matter. So yeah, while I was still enjoying the side quests at this point, and actually did so for a good portion of my time with this game, it basically means Boiling Point drags its feet so hard that it should be leaving meter-deep track marks. The main quest is only about 15 minutes long with a big final stage, but it's been laid out in such a way to make it the longest quarter of an hour of your life. It makes sure you are not getting there in a hurry, and it does force you, and by extension the character of Saul Myers, to involve himself in the situation in Realia. You have to give the people what they want if you want information in return, and every quest giver felt like they had a genuine self-interest within the country, and while they were far from rich, great-written characters, I at least bought why each faction absolutely hated each other, and it does take time to establish what each of them has and why, and that was a bit more than I expected going in. Hell, some of them even get voice acting in the dialogue trees alongside the main character. Not that he always has a voice himself. He feels if someone else is silently text boxing, then he should empathize and join them. It is incredibly inconsistent who gets voices, and the worst part is, I have no idea if the game is glitching or if they just didn't have voices at all. Boiling Point's gameplay is fun, despite the fact it falls apart semi-often, and when it does, it's only amusing a fraction of the time. And the charm it does have will severely wane before the conclusion is reached. Before that, it manages to pull off things in the shooting, driving, side questing, faction system, and map design that are really interesting. So while we're building up the travel funds to buy our way back into the main quest, if only for a moment, let's talk what we can do in Realia. There are 7 factions vying for control of Realia. The government, the guerrillas, the Mafia, the bandits, the Indians, the CIA, and the ordinary civilians, if they count, and according to this game they do. And they all think exactly the same way of you. Everyone's relation with Saul either goes up or down depending on who he murders. You know, I actually murdered a lot of guerrillas accidentally in roadside gunfights, and then sold their stuff since, you know, they look so bloody similar to the army. I even raided their headquarters twice, stealing money and documents, along with at that point purposefully killing their people since they were firing at me. And I killed a lot of bandits as well because they're just universally shit people. But both groups forgave me, even bloody well loved me.
Slow down, gringo.
Don't shoot, I'm with you.
That's Saul Myers.
Because I murdered a lot more soldiers overall. The guerrillas are the communist revolutionaries trying to overthrow the Realian government. Their missions are tough, and they don't pay very well. Plus, both in-game and out, I don't really identify as a communist. On the bright side, they do offer free medical.
Doctor, I got hurt fighting for the revolution. I need medical attention.
Lay down, comrade. We'll take care of you now.
The Mafia have equally dangerous assignments, but working for them is far more lucrative. They have a sprawling drug operation, and they've just invented some new form of adrenaline that's supposedly really good. I used it once and it just fucked with my screen a bit, and then went away, so I'm personally not sold. But it is making them bank, so what do I know? They're near enough as well equipped as the military, so some of their quest givers have helicopter missions if you get bored of murder on foot. The bandits are basically low-rent thugs. They don't pay out well, but then again, their jobs are pretty simple. I'd like to tell you what the other factions were like, but in the course of working for these lot, I pissed off the remaining guys so much that no one really wanted to employ me. As for the civilians, well, they don't really give a shit, save for this one old lady who threw a grenade at me. Their side quests don't pay out much. I'm not kidding, at one point my payment was fruit. But they are more talky, smaller scale stories. I didn't do too many of them. I did deal with a lover's tryst, 2 guys lusting after the same girl and both wanted me to kill the other for a good $2,000. The girl wanted nothing to do with either, and just wanted a ride out of town to get away from them. So I had my cake and ate it too. Killed one of the guys, collected the money from the other, and then got her out of Dodge. Call it morally neutral. I did do some bus driving for tuppence, and steal a church's relic back from the bandits. Not for any moral or religious reason, I just felt like shooting bandits. The factions do tie into progression of the main quest, when I had to find information on the editor's killer, for instance. As I said, I could have gone to the cop, but due to my for-profit army murder, they wouldn't exactly spill the beans. Had I been on better terms, I probably could have saved some dosh. While there are points where you have options, it all really leads to the same one place, but the more people you're on good terms with, the more paths you have available. How does this turret work? As for the content of the faction side quests, well, it's a decent selection. Blowing up trucks, stealing cargo and cars, killing blokes, freeing prisoners, kidnapping people's daughters because, you know, Saul's a hypocrite. But there are a good lot of repeat objectives, and you will revisit several locations more than once. Every faction only has a handful of notable bases on the rather sprawling map, so you'll get to know the lay of the land pretty well as you kill people in the same places they keep restaffing. I broke 3 people out of the same prison, stole documents from some base, then went back and blew up helicopters. And then went back again to kill the local quest giver. You know what? I could have gotten 3 times the money in 1/3 of the time if only you were better at your job. Gotta go blow up a guerrilla weapon shipment? You got it. Well, I blew it up, did that not count? Oh, you wanted me to do it with rockets, you pedantic sod. Yeah, it can be more than a little repetitive, and since the main quest necessitates a lot of side questing, if you don't like it to begin with, it's not going to get any better. I was once doing a little B&E for the bandits, but I broke into the wrong house and ended up doing an entirely different side quest, finding medicine for a sick old lady's kid, which took me miles off course and barely paid out. I then broke into the right house a few hours later than expected. The controls are your standard shooter fare, WASD to move and mouse to look. We've been over this. I mean, Boiling Point has some keybinds to look at your watch, but the only times that matter are day and not day. It's also sometimes really picky about whether I'm looking at a corpse or not so I can loot it. The combat as well has some issues, but it's nonetheless pretty fun. The selection of weapons is a bit skewed for a start. The pistol sucks, the revolver sucks a bit less, the shotgun sadly feels weak, but it still shotguns shit well enough. And all the assault rifles work in every situation, but once you buy the one with a scope, well, then you've peaked. There are rocket launchers, but really you don't need to bother with them, since helicopters can't aim worth a damn if you're on the ground and, well, they hardly turn up to the gunfights. A sniper rifle exists, but it didn't really do much better than my assault rifle in any case. There were also dual Uzis, and they went about as well as that'd go in real life. Luckily, the sound effects, animations of both the firearms and the hits landing lent most of the weapons a feeling of weight, and made them at the least enjoyable to use. Most of the combat takes place at a great distance, I'm talking 50 to a few hundred meters, and this is where it is the most fun. You try and pick off distant targets and move between cover that is spaced rather far apart, always making sure you're not getting flanked or fragged, because no grenade indicators are in this game. It manages to be tense, since each individual bullet does a hefty amount of damage, and getting caught off guard can have you dead very quickly. The combat is for the most part rather slow paced. Running and gunning will see you dead very quickly, you're supposed to find good ground and hold it, and you'll only be facing small groups of enemies at a time, less than 10 typically. But one guy in the right place can do you in very quick. The most enjoyable combat is in open ground because of this, but what does hold it back is the AI sometimes forgetting that its life is in danger and it acts a little bit chill, and then it dies. When it all works, however, it is a rather fun and exciting experience. However, I'm not sure if it's hit detection, or the fact you have a sleepiness stat that may affect accuracy, and Saul Myers is a big baby who needs a nap every 15 minutes, but occasionally shit like this happens. What probably does the most to make the combat fun is the map of Guerillas, and this will sound counterintuitive. The game world does not feel at all like it was tailor-made for the game's combat. It feels like a rundown South American country where the infrastructure has gone to absolute shit and this gunfight isn't helping matters. Distant battles in thick overgrown jungles where the foliage is making it hard for both me and the enemy to spot, where flanking is tricky and cover is thin, where the ground is on absolutely no one side, it just so happens we're having a battle here. Wide open army bases where cover is sparse, and they have the advantage of search towers. It's a small matter that many games can't quite get right, but the army bases actually feel like they're designed to be unbeatable. I mean, despite the fact they obviously are beatable, but they have defensible positions, and they're all facing outside, and the ground leading up to them is heavily exposed. This all leads to slow, considered encounters, where you and the enemy stalk each other and try not to get caught out. I moved around gunfights carefully picking off enemies one by one and trying my hardest to not get seen by more than one person at any given time, keeping a watchful eye for any sign of movement and listening out for grenades. When I found a vantage point where I could easily gun down a lot of people, it felt rewarding and it felt really powerful. Another reason you want to keep combat long distance is a matter of enemy accuracy. It seems to just get sharper the closer they are, and within spitting distance, their aim and reflexes become nothing short of godlike, and it's rather terrifying. It's like every soldier in the country is trying to hustle me into close range, where they can reveal that they could shoot all along. While at long distance they have a reasonable difficulty landing hits, but they can and will. The other issue is that shotgun enemies are placed indoors, and with that godlike accuracy, and shotguns, and they have more health and armor, well, they become fucking horrific. So I spent all my time indoors, slowly creeping around, exposing the rooms as slowly as possible, because one wrong move could see a lot of health gone in a flash. Go grenade spam! This is the first game I've played where I completely understood the appeal of grenades, I'm not kidding. Before I move on, there is stealth in this game, and by that I mean there's a knife, silenced bullets, a silenced handgun, a crossbow, and the guards do forget where you were if you disappear behind a wall for about 10 seconds.
Where's that Yankee doodler?
I never really tried to be stealthy though, particularly after I stabbed someone in the back and rather than dying he instead screamed really loudly and everyone heard. I mean, in a way, murdering everyone is just as stealthy in the long run if you leave no one alive to talk about it. I mentioned that you can't take all that many bullets. The health system in Boiling Point is rather unique, and it keeps the tension in each encounter rising in a very interesting way. Shots to the arm lower your accuracy, and while shots to the leg don't actually slow you down whatsoever, they do make the view bulb more intense, eventually becoming downright nauseating. Meanwhile, shots to the torso and the head do the most damage. Healing is either done through eating, but foodstuffs are either barely worth the bother, or they take a decent amount of carry weight and approaching the upper limit slows you down. Or you can use pain-killing syringes, which are light and effective, but they have diminishing returns. As you use painkillers, you develop an immunity to them, and you need to take greater doses to achieve the same effect. So as the battles drag out and you take damage, it genuinely piles on, as your means of recovery only get worse, to the point that even the strongest drugs will only recover single digits of health. It means that the longer you spend in enemy territory, the more desperate the situation gets. I find this way of doing things incredibly interesting. In a game with regenerating health, you can only really be screwed over by one big mistake. Every little cock-up doesn't really matter. In a game with health kits, well, you can only make so many little mistakes, but that doesn't matter so long as you have supplies. This creates a middle ground, where you can only ever be so prepared. Now, you can visit a doctor to get your immunity reset and make drugs effective again, but that doesn't help you when you're out in the middle of nowhere getting shot at, and it means you have to keep yourself in check between missions. It's not just the missions either. The map of Realia is dangerous. There are gunfights by the roadside, military ambushes, and wild animals. So the health system creates long periods of vulnerability. Even after you've done your objectives, cleared an army base, and you rode back out, well, you're not completely safe. You've got to remain on your guard. The combat gameplay itself is really just above average at best, and at times it can border on bad, but the map design and the health system elevate it. Sometimes surrounding factors like this can make up for shortcomings elsewhere. Let's talk about driving. Again, it's just okay, but this is even including WASD controls. A lot of it really does come down to what you're driving. I mean, all but 3 of the cars I touched were either incredibly slow, turned so slow that it was painful making even the simplest corners, or both. The remaining 3 were fine. They went at a decent clip, and it didn't take a bodybuilder to take turns, which is a plus. I spent a lot of time driving off-road, zipping between trees, going up and down hill, occasionally rocketing off cliffs, getting brought to a complete halt by a loose branch that fell on the floor, and sending my car careening underwater. Making long road trips down roads, cutting through the thick jungles, going off into the back roads leading to hidden Mafia encampments, trying to remain wary in case of sudden military ambush. That's some really impressive ambushing. You fucking warped trees into existence for me. Again, a lot of the enjoyment came down to the map being interesting enough to want to explore it. And you can find some interesting little landmarks in the wilderness that make things worth it. On the road, there are a lot of repeat models, the same gas station, roadside markets, and the bridges repeat themselves. But it honestly doesn't bother me much at all. They work, and that's all they really need to do in this case. The helicopters and the airplanes, well, they're pretty boring to say the least. Well, except when that happened, I had fun then. Hit the wrong button and fucked up pretty hard. A button to go up, a button to go down, you can turn left and right and increase or decrease your speed with W and S. It is simple as hell, incredibly stiff, and at one point I honestly just got up and went to go take a piss mid-flight since it's so uninvolved. Never said it was a good idea, but hey, I lived. Helicopter combat really just comes down to shooting first and then you've won. Despite the helicopters being incapable of hitting anyone on the ground, in mid-air their accuracy becomes bloody horrifying, so I guess they at least follow the accuracy trend. You've got infinite flares, so just spam them whenever you hear a missile alarm go off and you're golden. You will never be hit, and there is no delay in spamming them. The only real challenge is not falling asleep. You may have trouble with that occasionally though, since sometimes the alarm forgets to go off once the missile is gone. Sometimes for a very long time. Planes are similarly stiff, but within my time playing I only got my hands on them about 3 or 4 times for 5 minutes apiece, so they were hardly present. One button increases engine power, the other decreases, and everything else just leans. So turn on max power, point in the right direction for 5 minutes, while the ground struggles to stream in beneath you, and that's pretty much it. Don't worry about a bumpy landing. The wheels can really take it. One annoyance is the rather low height limit. I mean, it's not a big problem for most of the map, but then we get to this mountainous region over this way, and Saul Myers, being the lawful pilot that he is, will follow that height limit right into a tree, and shortly thereafter make a great bloody distance from said limit. I was once annoyed because I spent more than half an hour delivering the slowest helicopter in the game to a guerrilla base, failing over and over again because it turns so slowly that if an enemy spawns to the side of me, I was already dead. So after many repeat attempts, I finally made it. I hopped out of the helicopter and immediately saved. Then I unpaused, and it turns out that one of the wheels had gotten stuck in the roof, and the clipping caused the helicopter to explode. Mission failed. Yeah, I was really annoyed. It also meant that I had to go and pay the Don money to continue the plot again, since this was a side quest for main plot information, and that helicopter had just bit the dust. I guess it must have been in on Lisa's kidnapping. And as for the boats, well, who gives a shit? Let's go back to ground. In terms of driving, shooting, inventory management, healing, and doing side quests, everything adds up in a way that becomes greater than the sum of its parts, and it makes the whole thing weirdly immersive. It made me manage money and inventory and care for my equipment and health in a way that few games do. This is despite how glitchy and weird the game can be. I mean, hell, actually, it may even be because it's weird and glitchy that getting sucked into it can be so enthralling. I gotta buy my guns and maintain them, and buy the right ammo for them. I mean, you can nab enemy weapons, but they're always in such bad repair that they jam every 2 or 3 shots. You know what? It's funny. These guns don't have the problem when they use them. I did settle on a rifle that used the same kind of ammo as the military since, you know, I was killing them the most, so I could just at least scrounge for bullets. This game predates tagging enemies and things like that, so you've got to use your eyes and shit. If that sounds a bit much, this may not be for you. The health system means I can only be fighting for so long, and even as fights go on and there are less enemies to worry about, I have to remain careful, because I've only got so many syringes, and the more I use them, the weaker they get. Plus, body armor is bloody expensive, particularly if you want the good stuff, and even then, it will only see you through 2 or 3 fights. The penalty for death is hefty, considering how important money is. You lose a ton of dosh, alongside a few items selected at random, not to mention getting warped miles away back to town, and your car will still be out near the objective. I settled on giving myself a save every half hour or so instead, because, well, the base system was a bit much for me. The health also meant that I'd have to go and see a doctor between each mission to get my addiction reset. Boiling Point did also pull off something that no other game has. It made me care for my car. Now granted, I did go through 2 or 3 in the course of my time playing, but I still cared while they were there. I had to keep it in good repair, refuel the thing. It was also a place to stash the guns I'd looted off of corpses so that I could sell them later. I'd turn the engine off so I didn't waste fuel, and so on. I'd park it at a safe distance from objectives. Luckily the map automatically marks cars you've driven, so I wouldn't have too much trouble tracking it down later. Didn't want to lose the thing, I didn't want to lose the thing, since getting stranded without a car miles from the road is a genuine risk. It would mean a bloody long trek back through miles of jungle, infested with wild animals and military patrols. When a mission involved breaking into a military base a few miles from town and stealing a truck filled with equipment, I bought a cheap, expendable car rather than lose the one I liked. It also gave me an opportunity to use a car I didn't care about, so I could try running down a few soldiers. It wasn't a great plan, but hey, I lived. This does all add up. I've got to maintain my gear, carefully decide if it's worth repairing my car or paying medical costs to refill my health completely and fix my painkiller immunity, because I also need money to keep the plot moving. So, of course I'll be careful in fights. Of course I won't pay out the arse for the very expensive quick travel too often. Getting shot is bloody expensive. Now, this does all work very well while you still enjoy the game. It adds a layer of decision making that heightens the moments where you are in danger. But the moment you stop enjoying the game, this all turns around and it starts weighing down on everything else. That was my problem nearing the end. When I had had my fun and I just wanted to move on, now every gunfight required me to spend 20 minutes to half an hour getting into fighting shape again before the next one.
Bye, Doc. Hope I won't be seeing you again soon.
Who knows, young man? Who knows?
I did start saving money on gas nearing the end of the game, at least. when I realized that if you hold down the button to turn off the engine while driving, you'll just drive without the engine on. And you know, the engine uses the most fuel out of any part of the car, so with this part turned off, it's far more efficient on mileage. In fact, it's infinite miles to the gallon. Boiling Point does a good job making you feel like a mercenary in some war-torn shithole as you drive from job to job, avoiding military checkpoints, and largely profiting off of other people's misery. Boiling Point is a game that is fun, even though I spent 20% of it walking back to my truck.
Myers, did you find Lisa?
Not yet, but I'm doing everything I can.
Well, I should know what that means. Drinking tequila like there's no tomorrow. And for you, it's true. Heard about that we're married.
No, I'm not in a bar drinking. I've become a respected member of the Mafia, and I'm currently destabilizing an already impoverished nation, removing what little infrastructure it may have had. As for Lisa, I'll get around to her sometime. Let's talk about Saul Myers.
Gringo, there's a man there. Wow, that was awesome, dude.
Saul Myers is bloody great. He is a complete and utter bastard.
I'm looking for some risky business.
But an enjoyable bastard.
Half my friends call me the Terminator, the Freight Dog, Airport Defender, Mr. Persuasion. Of course, Commandante. Back home, everyone calls me the Red Thread. You know, Leoncio, half my friends call me the Blade of Death.
Never heard that before, Myers.
Saul must lead a very interesting life back in France.
How's life, gringo?
Do you have spies in your town?
God, some of the dialogue in this game is so amusing. I have no idea whether it's intentional or not.
Afternoon, Doc.
Hola. They call me Dr. Death.
Don't you think your name is a bit pretentious?
That's what my buddies call me. Only a third of my patients actually survive on a good day. Basket cases to a man. It's a miracle I even managed to save anyone. And they make fun of me.
There was a side mission, a man preparing to jump off of a bridge. It took me about 15 minutes and trying every possible combination in the dialogue tree trying to talk him down, because it turns out that the solution was to yell at him to kill himself until he convinced himself he didn't want to. That was really fucking weird, but it did fit my image of Saul. Saul is perhaps the least heroic protagonist who has ever had to save their kid. He doesn't care for the problems within Realia, doesn't even feign interest whatsoever, and is clearly just a guy for hire. Everyone else to him, regardless of their goals, is just a stepping stone to getting his daughter back. He has no personal stakes beyond that. That is completely understandable. He would never have come here otherwise.
Well, that'll be a piece of cake for me, Commandante. Back home, my friends call me the Infiltrator.
Somehow I doubt that.
But he is clearly fucking loving it. He has wanted his daughter to get kidnapped her whole life so he could bust in and show off all his cool guy army moves and revel in dad power fantasy. He is way better at murder than everyone else in the country, and he knows it. He loves it. And as faction relations build, everyone either looks at him in fear or in loving awe of the man, the myth, the legend, Saul Myers. I wish this was completely intentional. As it stands, it just comes off that way. He'd probably be my favourite protagonist of all time if that were the case. His face shouldn't have exploded there. He should have been holding back a massive grin. He is a balding, middle-aged military man who has wanted to be Rambo his whole life, and his daughter just handed him the opportunity.
I'll inject myself if needed. Hell, Rambo did it.
He's an arsehole even when he doesn't need to be.
Any weapons for sale?
The boss does the selling. We just keep him safe.
Not too talkative, huh? What is that, some kind of speech impediment?
Boss talks, we guard.
What are those guerrillas hanging around here for? Aren't you worried about them messing up the store?
Amigo, can't you tell people from Guerillas? These are just innocent kids, the sons of my stepsister's aunt.
Plus, he looks back fondly on Driver 3, but we're none of us perfect.
Okay, Don Esteban. I used to kick ass at Driver 3, so I won't have any problems with this mission.
This is a poster in the second town of the game. There are only 2 towns. The first town is owned by the government. It is in every regard a better town, but it doesn't have this poster. This town was at some point, in the past, taken over by the Guerillas, and they have taken up governance of the place, as you can see from this here corpse pile, and the general air of misery. This poster remains. Los Tomatos. I'm about to get back to the pretty non-existent 15 minutes of plot, but before then, here are some of my problems with the game. One's pretty minor, the other will probably drive people away pretty quickly, and the last one I'd probably go on about it for much too long. The menus are incredibly clunky and unresponsive. Picking up a great deal of stuff and selling it is way slower and more annoying than it needs to be. And you can't arrange your inventory manually. I have no idea how it organizes stuff, so it feels completely random. The sound in this game is some of the worst I've ever heard. You can hear a static click whenever a new track loads in. Not to mention, sometimes the character yawning would be accompanied by this horrifying musical sting. And static once again, because you can't forget that. There are only a handful of dialogues outside of the conversation trees, and they repeat a ton.
And did you think of sticking a grenade down his throat?
These rats have gotten out of hand.
Hey, Gringo, this ain't kindergarten. You do that once again. Well, what was I speaking about?
The combat tracks are very few, and they repeat a ton. The audio quality is so incredibly poor, and that, along with the static, means I get a headache after only a short period of play. The reason this review took me longer than usual was because I could only play this game in short bursts. I mean, I got a couple of 2 or 3 hour sessions out of it, but if the sound messed up enough consecutively, I get headaches. And while I walked away somewhat pleased with Boiling Point, it was not good enough that I'd have headaches over it. Sometimes firearm sounds won't work, which happens most often with the dual Uzis, but they're terrible even besides that, so it's even more reason not to use the bloody things. The sound also has a very unique problem. At times, particularly in conversations, the music will drown out so you can hear what the fuck's going on. Sometimes, however, it will shoot up instead. I have no idea how you fuck up that hard that you basically go in reverse, but hell.
How much for telling me where Banco's wallet is?
The economy of this game is ultimately a strong component in making you decide whether to strive for better equipment or keep your stuff that you have in shape. But there are things like getting drunk and weapon modding that are quite expensive and near worthless. The stealth weapons cost so much because you can imagine that going quiet would be cheaper in the long term since you don't get shot as much. But stealth is so poorly implemented that you just end up wasting money on a very expensive, incredibly weak silenced pistol. Things like this are a mixed bag for me, however. As I said at the start of the review, part of the reason I enjoy unpolished games is because every weird odd and end some designer thought would be fun, but couldn't quite think the whole thing through. Well, the idea will still make it in, and no one has the time, energy, or oversight to excise it from the finished product. The economy also seems completely opposed to giving away money easily besides all this. Selling gear is worthless, the car dealers shut down after only 2 or 3 sales, and quest givers usually only pay out 2,000 to 3,000 for each quest, and moving the main plot along costs about 20,000 each time you have to pay, so it moves along very slowly.
Enemy inside! Come on!
Hey, you pale-faced! Here's the idol. It's about as gross as my freaking life.
Yeah.
Alright, I worked up to 20,000, Don. Tell me, who's the killer?
I know a little bit about him. He goes by the name of Banco.
Ah, an assassin named Banco. He's a really good killer. You can tell, because he's got a cabin in the woods, which is surrounded by other killers protecting him in case of other killers. He stands around on the 2nd floor, doing nothing. So I go there and I fight my way in, accidentally killing him prematurely by throwing a grenade on the 1st floor, which manages to frag him through the ground. Luckily, an expositional note he was carrying survived the rumbling floor. Right, off to find his employer. I do go to the Guerillas first as a cost-saving measure, but then helicopter. More money for Pedro then. Wait, Don, you'll spot me this one if I break a guy out of prison? Only one side quest? Don Pedro, you spoil me. Right, got the guy, let's go. Shit, busted out the wrong one. back in I go. Shit. I blew up the guy I was supposed to save through the bloody ground. Escorting NPCs in this game is awful, I'm not gonna lie. It's like they're attached to you via a bungee cord with a bit too much slack. I mean, that's if they'll even be able to figure out doors and follow the bloody invisible tether. Come on, you twat. Get out of your cell. I am Saul Myers, the Slam Buster. So I eventually work the fucker out of jail. I meet up with him in a bar in Communist Town, and he reveals Banco's employer. It's a guy called Aztec, and following the housing trend of killers, he lives in a cabin in the woods. Real original Aztec.
You should treat your visitors nicer.
Not when they come for my money.
Just as he appears all guilty in that, a hit squad of guys we've been killing turns up to make Aztec look innocent, like a hapless cog in a scheme he doesn't understand, and a defense section ensues. We have to hold the intruders at bay while Aztec rings his brother. This section is pretty easy. You just, just stand behind the cabin and move whenever a rocket is flying towards you. They can't really do much. Aztec's brother arrives and flies us to a nice safe beach house where we can get an info dump. I have some trouble hearing it over some army chuckle fuck. Nice attempt at sabotage, mate, but I've got subtitles. We then get the code to the newspaper editor's safe, since no cop has gone there to investigate or touch the safe or really do anything about the shooting. Well, at least getting killed warped me back to town, and closer to that office. And some lovely people were waiting there for me. God, I'm so glad I got killed so I didn't keep them long. I get the files from the safe, and it's a bank number. I guess we'll have to pay to figure out who that belongs to. Oh god, I'm right.
I'm so tired, exhausted with this corrupt, iniquitous world. Oh, well, just give me 22,000.
Okay, the bank manager wants over 20,000 and the Don wants 20,000 flat. Well, Don, you drive a hard bargain. Off I go side questing, and later we come to learn that it belongs to a company called Experiential Electronics, and they have a warehouse in the woods. So I go shooting there as well. One of them dies rather uncomfortably. The owner of the warehouse, already dying when Saul arrives, tells us with his last breath to look for a bloke named Miguel. He turns out to be some guy who fled from Experiential's employ and is currently hiding, working in a diamond mine ran by Pedro. The mine is controlled by the Mafia and under attack by the Guerillas, but due to my clever history of killing soldiers, both sides love me. So I just walk through the conflict, only accidentally getting shot a couple of times. I hope they don't mind that I'm helping myself to their dead allies' arms. I mean, I'm financially hemorrhaging trying to save my kid, so they should understand. The fucker in the mines wants a passport and 10,000 pesos. Mate, do you realize how boring it is walking here through these mines? Plus, you're way off the main road, getting here is a hassle. You have to appreciate that I would be really bored doing that, because I'd have to come back. I try to threaten my way to an early success, but it doesn't work. So I went and spent $3,000 on a cheap passport. He saw right through it.
How's life, gringo?
Oh man, it sucks to be me.
So I went and jailbroke a better fake passport guy and saved up the 10 grand. So he tells me to go talk to his mate in a native village about a kilometre's walk from here. And now Miguel can look forward to a new life in America without fear of experiential. Get fucked. I head over to talk to Miguel's friend, but he's busy getting kidnapped by some guys from Experiential Electronics. I go to ask the locals where they're taking him, but they won't talk to me since I stole a relic from a similar town like 10 miles away 10 hours ago. So, I thought I was fucked. According to my objectives, the chief here is the only guy who can fill me in. That's it. By this point, I was getting bored of the game. That charm I had spoken of, well, it had worn down. Actually, probably had worn off completely by this point. But I hadn't quite given up yet. I ran down to a nearby bus stop to try and get back to town, but an unaffiliated bloke there told me where to go. Free. completely free. And I was back in the saddle. I even did a bus job for him, since, you know, it gave me a free card to get back to town and get ready for the fight. I chased the captors down and murdered a lot of them. And we get a big twist.
Not that you're not hitting all the notes, but why are you screaming? Who is Don Diego, and where is he located?
Where is Don Diego? I don't know. And I don't want to know. Like a regular Don. Fat. Evil. With a cigar. He's Don Diego, and they're calling him Don Pedro.
Yeah, it figures. Saul doesn't even sound mad.
Thanks, amigo. You really helped me out. I think I know what's going on now.
Well, I'm glad one of us does. I completely forgot about the Don Diego thing, actually. It got buried in like 30 hours of near enough nothing happening in the story itself.
Did you find out what that worker revealed?
Yes, Don Pedro. He managed to tell Saul Myers everything.
So, it's time to charge Pedro's compound. God, I really should have shot this place up 20 hours ago now that I think about it. But then again, I guess hindsight is 20/20. Okay, that's happened about 3 or 4 times, and I love it each time it happens.
Oh, man!
Don Pedro has fled to his secret island base on the other end of the map, and I have no clue how to get there. Then I find a car dealership with a helicopter for sale, and I figure that's my best bet. I mean, it's either that or go to a quest giver who has a helicopter job lined up, so I can just nick that. That'd be entirely random though, I'd pretty much done every helicopter job available to me. Since I had been nice to the Guerillas for so long, and had exhausted every side quest near the town with a helicopter, well, I'm reduced to working with the bandits. So I do a bunch of relatively petty crimes. Still means a lot of dead people though. So, 15,000 pesos later, I have a helicopter, and my work laid out for me. The helicopter barely survives the journey, and then some twat in a lighthouse shot at it until it exploded. A dumb move since it traps me on the island with him. I fight to Don Pedro, and he has another twist in store.
My people don't play games.
Bang!
Ah! Why do you think I know where she is? Listen, Myers, it's not me. Alberto Caruzzo's behind all this. He found some crazy mad scientist and built him a research laboratory. They talk about mind control. I have no idea what he's on about. Something to do with mindscapes and Tesla research, a bunch of other stuff like that.
What about my daughter?
She can't be controlled. The stuff works on everyone, but not her.
He was hired to kidnap Lisa by this fucker in the bar. I should have known from the moment he was voiced. He's making mind control bullshit, and he's in his secret volcano lair on the far north end of the map with Lisa captive. Saul should be so happy. He not only got to be the big dad hero guy, but the bad guy decided to be a fucking supervillain. So, Saul goes outside, and an underling of the new villain drops from a helicopter and tells him a bit more.
My daughter. Do you know where Lisa is?
Yes, she's in the Black Tower. It's the code name of the research center financed by Alberto Caruzzo.
Looks like Fat Pedro is telling the truth. What else do you know?
As opposed to all the other Pedros we've met on our journey. We get a chip to block the bad guy's mind control. Well, I mean, that's great, but what I'd really like is a ride back to the mainland. Oh, well, fuck you then. Second time using a boat then. God, those lessons really paid off. A few hours later, I'm driving to a volcano finale, and I think, boy, this really came out of Left Wing. This was a nice simple plot about Mafia kidnappings earlier on, but now it's got an all conspiracy on me. Life can get complicated, I guess. Oh look, sparklies. The final stage, it's a bloody test of endurance. A maze base that's ultimately linear and very bland. I mean, when I say maze, I mean there are side rooms that have keys to open up the one and only path. It can take upwards of an hour, where every other base was safely less than half that. The damage piles on, and eventually recovering health just doesn't work. Despite this, I slowly creep my way to Lisa. This is what proved to me that the combat was mainly enjoyable because of the open nature of the battlegrounds. Replaced with a generic concrete base, it collapses under its own average nature. And this final base has no unique gimmicks to speak of. Those sparklies outside don't even add up to anything.
Trains look like they could star in trains run.
Where'd he go?
Lisa is hooked up to some mindfuckery coma machine, and removing her prematurely would kill her.
How long till the scan is over?
Let me see. In about 3 days, 11 hours, and 17 minutes, approximately.
Okay, that's cool, I'll just go sleep in the corner. No, of course that doesn't happen. Saul is way less patient than I am, and that's really fucking saying something. We can get Lisa out of her coma early if we blow up some antenna bullshit in the center of the volcano. But we'd need to blow up its supports. We shoot out some more goons and then walk into a conference room. The agenda of this meeting is the evil guy calling out Saul Myers. This scene is actually so impressively stupid that if I were to break it down in detail, it would probably add another 10 minutes to this video all by its lonesome.
Why did you get into this, Myers? Eager to play a superhero?
No, he's here because you kidnapped his daughter, you fucking idiot.
Well, someone's gotta take a stand and stop jerks like you.
No, you're here because he kidnapped your daughter, you fucking idiot.
What do you know about it, Myers? You want to stop me? What for? Look at this country. Drugs, war, gangsters everywhere. Children are dying from hunger. The survivors pick up machine guns at 15 and start killing each other.
It's their choice. They should go to college instead.
Oh, for God's sake, Myers, stop trying. Are you attempting to be equally stupid with this man? Anyway, he wants to use his mind control beam for world peace. Okay, one point that a friend raised when I showed him this cutscene. He was so threatened by this one journalist he had to resort to kidnapping her. But she couldn't have been all that prolific. The only person to investigate her disappearance was her dad, and serendipity would have it, it just happened to be Saul Myers.
You know, you're just a babbling fool. Forget it, I'm not gonna argue with you.
Yeah, just give the villain a silent treatment. Why has no one ever thought of this before?
In 5 minutes, the antenna's signal will be running at full strength, and your chip won't help you then. After that, I might even make you my chief of security.
Oh yeah?
Bang,
we'll see about that.
Bang. Well, onto the final challenge, and it leverages how bad this stage has been so far, and doubles down hard. It is terrible. Aside from anything else, the gun I've been using is running low on ammo, and guess what? The enemies use a gun different to mine that takes a different ammo type. And I can't take their guns, since this supervillain doesn't keep his troops' equipment in good repair. And the armory in this base has no ammo, and all the guns in there do not share the ammo nor match the weapons his troops use. Great world building, fucko. It is filled with RPGs, however, but I just need those to clear the stage. And luckily my carry weight stat is so high by this point, I jammed 12 rocket launchers into my trousers. The ending arena is a giant open space with 4 rooms, one on each corner. Enemies spawn in infinitely, and I'm assuming with no upper limit. You actually can't kill them quickly enough, they will spawn faster. My health is at this point completely shot, I can barely recover health, and there is no way to work to the rooms carefully, you just have to run and hope. I will consider it a mark of honor that I made it to the first 2. This is the most poorly thought out final challenge I think I've played. The last 2 rooms, I couldn't do it. I had so little health, so few bullets, and when I nabbed an enemy weapon, it jammed every 2 or 3 shots, so I have to reload, and in that time, 3 more enemies will plop in out of fucking nowhere. It's not only bad since it completely works against the game it's in, it's a badly thought out and designed challenge, period. This wouldn't be good in any game. Oh, I guess it's mind control then. I resorted to cheats to win, and even then I died. I guess at least they're nice enough to send me back to town. Eventually though, by cheating fast enough, I made it. I blew up the final supports, and the antenna collapses. We get on a helicopter and head home, Lisa alive and well.
Daddy?
Yeah?
I'm thinking of quitting journalism. Just before I came out here, I was offered another job. A much better one.
What kind of job?
A medical job. The noblest profession of all. 1 month of training and I started as a paramedic.
She decides to become an EMT because, well, I guess she's learned a lot on her journey.
they've got a real shortage of medical staff out there, so the Red Cross...
Hey, Lisa,
Yes, Pop?
can we talk about this when we get home?
Saul doesn't really care. He's probably thinking really hard about how he's going to rejoin society without being branded as an absolutely gigantic criminal. So in conclusion, Boiling Point is bloody weird. It's perhaps the second glitchiest thing I've reviewed, but fortunately most of the time the bugs were harmless, even amusing. The driving and shooting aren't great, but are better than the sum of their parts by the systems they rely on. The side quests and the structure around them do a good job making you actually prepare and involve yourself in the world, but they get boring before the end. And Saul Myers is a fun dickhead.
I won't communicate with an enemy of my country, mister.